Hi everyone. My name is Sean Blanton, and I'm going to give a survey overview of how I use Perl in a high-tech trading environment. Someone is looking for performance. A lot of the performance-related tasks are actually left to the C++ code. But really, I'm going to emphasize the versatility of Perl in a variety of tasks. And one story, I'm gonna look into depth about services and using breadboard. That has really helped me a lot in my work. So let's get this thing rolling here. It's a little bit about the trading industry to begin with. So it all started with this. And how fitting that we would start a talk in Wisconsin with beer, one of the three great pillars of Wisconsin. So what are the other two pillars? Cheese and? Packers. There you go. Okay. So there's this great documentary that's available on Netflix. It's called How Beer Saved the World. And right, the oldest beer samples, 7,000 years ago. Writing arose, according to them, specifically to support beer and barley trades. And I did a little fact-checking on Wikipedia. It seems to back this up. Leavened bread only arose about 3,000 years ago, and they didn't even mention in the documentary that apparently leavened bread comes by mixing a little bit of beer with this flatbread. So anyway, that's only 3,000 years ago. So we have the trading industry is older than bread. Right, here's a 4,000-year-old receipt for a beer shipment. It's about Chicago's trading industry. That's where I'm located. Chicago has some big players in derivatives trading. What is derivatives? Usually that's associated with some huge loss that somebody incurred, and little old ladies losing their savings, maybe, I don't know. But there's two big players. There's the CME Group, there's Chicago Board Options Exchange, and then there's another exchange, Intercontinental Exchange. They have their actual, what we call the matching engine, the trading engine in Chicago, although they're headquartered in Atlanta. You know, if you look if you look at the money, we know there's lots of money going on these days in the financial world, and lots of things making us angry too about bad things happening with lots of money. But the market capitalization, to give you an idea of where Chicago fits into the equation, is you have the equities. Everybody knows about stocks. They talk about stocks all the time. Apple goes up. Is Apple going down? Facebook down. The market capitalization of these stocks, equities, in the U.S. is $30 trillion. The rest of the world, $20 trillion. And you have fixed income bonds, mostly government bonds, $64 trillion. It's quite a bit. But derivatives, futures, contracts, options, swaps, $450 trillion. So the principal players of trading this $450 trillion derivatives market is all in Chicago. I found this hilarious, but the CME Group, this big, awesome player in derivatives, was originally called the Chicago Butter and Egg Board. So from small beginnings come great things, I guess. But in the noughties, do people use that term in the U.S.? The noughties, you know, 2000s, between 2000 and 2009, where you have a zero, you know, it's not the 2010s. We don't really use a term like that in the United States, but in the noughties, CME Group ended up, you know, acquiring all these different mercantile exchange commodities and things like that. I will get to some Perl. All of these companies I mentioned, they're all electronic based. They're heavily electronic, and the point is, a huge electronic trading system or ecosystem has arisen in Chicago, and there are dozens, if not maybe 100 companies developing software in this industry. And one of the things we can say with certainty, I had 2, and then I changed it. There are 3 certainties. So Linux, C++, and Perl. So if you look in like the job market in Chicago, you see, unlike the rest of the country that's trying to hire .NET and Java programmers, in Chicago, a large fraction, either half or a third of all development positions are for C++. Yes. Shout out to Chicago, PM, and Windy City. But also, the Chicago Perlmongers is often hosted by the Bank of America Market Data Group. So we got the trading industry giving back to the Perl community very generously. So so I work for Chopper Trading. I work for this trading firm, and they're not all evil. I'm very proud that we have very high ethical standards. It's demanded. The boss says, "I'm not going to jail," and it's named after a friendly dog, the owner's dog, who definitely outranks me in the company. Head to head, I would definitely go before the dog did. And we do charitable giving, Big Brother Big Sister program. Obama fundraiser. So there's room for all kinds here. Let's see what I got here. And I'm not gonna. The main goal of the business is not to save babies or plant a lot of trees. So I'm not really here to try to tell you this is, the most. I don't know, the most. But it's a great place to work. We have awesome technology and very, very sharp people, given a lot of resources to do things the way we think they should be done. We're held accountable for performance and delivering things, but I really like the environment there. And do we all feel these days that we have to answer, why aren't we doing this in Python? I'm so tired of that. And when I wrote the slide, I made a typo, but I liked it, so I left it in. So, yeah, Python is trendy, of course, and I used to travel around, used to work for OpenMake software. Quinn Bailey over here gave a talk this morning. And software developers are some of the trendiest people. They're like 14-year-old girls, and they just go to new technologies, and they all want to get on the same technology. And I don't really feel like that's the case in the Perl community. But so, yeah, Perl is it in the trading industry. I don't want to, if I'm going to do a serious job, everybody feels that Perl is the tool to do that. And if you want a cute script that looks like COBOL, feel free to use Python. I just don't understand. Everything else is in C and in Linux. And, of course, Perl has a great relationship with the Linux environment, and it's C-based. Python's C-based too, right? But it's this integration into the environment that helps Perl be successful. And so it's also part of the industry tradition. And then, a couple personal notes. CPAN is awesome, makes it very easy to find libraries and docs. Speed is very important. Sometimes we're under pressure to get things turned around fast. There's great support from the community. All of these things really help me do my job. So Yeah, so I've been a chopper for almost 3 years, and I use Perl for a lot of stuff. I joined a team I was the fourth member of a team, really didn't have much going on in terms of infrastructure. We have an application. And over that time, first of all, I learned how to code much better than I ever coded before, and use it primarily for supporting the application that we use for trading. Quite complex configuration, but a lot of things like make the servers go up, make the servers go down, some system and administration. I do data collection, I do reporting, I generate Excel reports, I put stuff on the web, have a website for the team. The wiki is all run in Perl, and I started doing some data analysis with PDL, and I just got handed the Git and build job, Git admin and build admin for our team. So been using tools that I helped create at OpenMix Software, the Mojo and Meister. Mojo is just a job control tool that basically it executes my Perl scripts for me on a schedule and gives me great reporting back to a central web server. And Meister is the awesome build tool. So your insurance companies and your banks and your ATMs and your voting machines, they're all compiled with Meister, not with GNU Make. And as I added functionality in this environment, as I started doing new things, I really objectively looked at what tool was I going to use for each of these items. And I kept coming back to Perl, and it's great. And I wanted to make a special note about PDL. I know we have PDL guys here, Dave. And so everything I have is in Perl, and if I need to do data analysis, it makes sense to stay with Perl. And there's many tools out there, MATLAB and things like that. R is a trendy open source data analysis tool, and I just want to say in a public forum how much I hate R. I was trying to get data out of the database, and every plugin is written by a different person with their own idea of how standard should be. I'm not quite there yet, but I started this project, and but I'm going to get data from a database. I'm starting to give some hints about where I'm going here with my database execution service, and do some data transform with Perl, hand it to PDL, do some processing, get some statistics out of my data set, take the results and put it back onto the web, and using Perl template toolkit and jQuery and jplat, get a little JavaScript there. So that's a really attractive way to roll. Okay, so I have a lot of bullet points. Sorry about that. If I had maybe 10 more hours to work on the doc, I could get rid of some of them. Let me go on to logging. So in my environment, logging is like one of the most critical functions. And if you want to know if your server is going up and down, you really need to have a persistent record of what happened. And so in my code, everything has access to a logger. Everything must have a logger, which is not the same thing as saying everything is logged, right? So my executable Perl, my Perl classes, my Perl services, anything that does anything important or could produce an error has access to a logger. I have like a couple classes that just have data, but I have something I've really enjoyed is having a daily log file that automatically rotates. So every day I have a record of every script that was run throughout the day. So I always know exactly what happened. If something gets screwed up, I go and see, I ran this. was there an error, whatever. So that's a bit of advice I really stick with, stand behind. And what messages to log, right? Creating useful log files, let's say, is partly an art, but mostly common sense. How many people have had to deal with horrific, there's the second time I use the word, log files with complete garbage, thousands and tens of thousands of lines of useless material? Yes, that's common. So I'm not sure some people obviously don't, I'm not sure they put enough attention into really thinking about what is a useful log message. And I think you should say, why am I reading a log file? Well, I want to determine if my program succeeded in its primary objectives. Very often I want to see a little bit roadmap to make sure that I don't just get, I don't want a 1 or 0 at the end of an important program execution. And then, of course, some basic reason for failure if the program did not succeed. And I think people sometimes try to provide too much information because if there's a defect, they'll get all of the debug information that they need to narrow down the problem, although that usually doesn't work. So, you can always temporarily increase the logging and narrow it down. And of course, as a rule of thumb, if you go to read a log and you're always skipping through lines, then why are they there? Take them out. We have so I use log for Perl, and we have a we have a guest here who's from Turkey, but this is a log based on Log4j, very successful logging program. Who here is following Euro 2012? Fortunately, Turkey didn't make it, but they beat 2 of the teams that are in it right now, recently. Who thinks Germany is going to win? Anybody? No opinions? Okay, there we go. Germany's going to win. All right. Anybody else? Spain? So, married to a Turkish woman, and so logging. I've always thought, being exposed a bit to Turkey. I'm going for my 14th time here this summer, but a number of people I know are extremely scrupulous. Every step detailed. I witnessed a poor friend of mine experience emotional trauma because we deviated slightly from a recipe one time. So every step must be followed. Every step must be logged. So I just have another example of that sort of precision here. Why am I? Oh, I see. Oh, well. Here's a goal of the year in 2010. I'm a Turk. Very nice. Look at that precision. See? Detail. Exact. Now, can I get back to where I was? This is my first time using Google Docs for a presentation. Oh, yeah, there's this one. Great. I guess I have to file through here. So, thank you. Get some smart people. All right, so I was preparing for this talk, and I wanted to look at moose to get a little description of what they said they were. And then I went to get a picture of a moose. So I searched on Google Images for moose, just moose, and this came up. This is Andy Lester. I don't even know if he's here. I've never actually met him face to face, I think. But obviously, Chrome and Google conspired to provide what they thought I wanted to see. Yeah, I wanted a moose. But anyway, that's a pretty funny picture. So, sorry, one last look. Right, so anybody here not use moose? Okay, it's okay. I do. I end up with quite a lot of code, and I find a good object-oriented system is really important for my work, and so I really like moose. Really helps me a lot. I can create classes very quickly. And powerful features like the standard. I mean, plenty of people will give you plenty of reasons why they like Moose. I like it easy to read, which also helps me do things faster if I need to. Another thing that helps me out tremendously is Eclipse. Anybody use Eclipse with Perl here? Okay. Yeah, so it really helps if you have a large code base. My favorite editor is still Vim, but I can get access to the whole code base much easier with Eclipse, with folder view, and I also have some bits of code. I do a lot of stored procedure writing, so I use Eclipse for managing database code. So yeah, it's a good tool. You should think about it. And this is really just a section break. I call it service-oriented Perl. I don't know. Need to go a little faster here. So how I define a service. So I'm saying I'm creating services. What do I mean by that? Okay, it's a highly reusable collection of code, usually consists of multiple classes or subroutines. So I'm looking for something that has a single well-defined interface, a single focus. So logging. I have a logging service. All I want it to do is give me a logging handle. I have database services. Give me a connection to this database. I don't want to go and type the username and password and DSN in my code. I want a high-level ability to get whatever it is. Well-defined data, a set of data or objects. And these services depend on other services. So everything depends on the logging service. So it helps get you to that single level of abstraction at a high level. So I'm doing a lot of high-level coding. I'm going to end up doing something like this. So at the beginning, I have a list of host names, and I have applications running on each of those servers, and I'm going to create a server object that represents the program that's running on that host name. And in order to do that, I create, we'll see, this container, and I'll end up getting my service for this particular application. I create a list of processes, servers, and I end up, I'll go through this, but forking out the processes, and this is a restart. So under child actions, I stop and start the program. So it gives nice, clean code, right? So I consider them a little higher level abstraction and encapsulation than a typical Perl module. So a logging service can hide a lot of the setup and configuration of logging. The log for Perl can be kind of, can take a lot of work to get exactly what you want there. The configuration file, where's the configuration file? All that stuff is hidden. Right, again, I said that the database, just give me the connection, hides the DSN and initial connection, and just give me the data, please, if I want some specific set of data. Right, and now we have services that depend on other services. Data service depends on the database connection service, and it also depends on the logging service. The database connection service depends on the logging service. Everything gets logged. I mean, everything has a logger. So when I started out, I thought, hey, this is great. I'll just kind of include the code for my logger here, and that works fine. If it's simple, I can just sort of import my logging service and retrieve the log here, and yeah, at one point somebody told me I was wrong for doing this, but there's this module moosex log for Perl, which is exactly what this is. So there. Well, it's fine for simple services, but now we're starting to get into a little more complex example. I just want to get a list of all the beers, right? So I have a service called beer data, and I need to log in my program that what I'm doing. So I need a logging service and I need a beer data service. But the beer data service requires a database connection, so I have to import the database connection. But sorry, I apologize for this slide. But right, I only want the beer data and logger, but I need to also include the database connection for this type of service. The database connection depends on logger. Okay, that's not relevant. But let's skip to the end. I'm required to have knowledge of the service dependencies here. So I had to know in my head that the beer data service needed a database connection. I don't want to do that. I don't want to know the dependencies. I want to reuse everything. And that's giving me a low-level service when I really want a high-level service. So it's breaking that single level of abstraction that we aim for. So what I really want to do is just basically get my logger, get my beer data, and have the beer data just give me the beer data. Hide the implementation. So, of course, I'm not the first person to run into this problem. What they call this, there's inversion of control. That's kind of a name that doesn't really mean a lot to me. But what we really want to do is we want to decouple service functionality. So we want to be able to decouple them, and then we need some way to reassemble our services with the right dependencies. So the dependencies should be resolved, and we should reduce redundancy. Okay, the log service, for example, we don't want to create like a bunch of log classes for everything we're going to do. We want a singleton so that every service is using the same logging service. So the Perl solution ends up being, one solution is with breadboard, and that's a breadboard. Anybody ever work with a breadboard? Great. So breadboard's designed for this. John Rockway suggested it, and I'm eternally grateful for that. So it took me a while to plow through the documentation and come up with a way that was easy to use, to make it easy to use, and worked for me. So be careful if you dive into breadboard. I had a lot of difficulty with the documentation, but there's a lot of cool stuff in there. Right, so as I alluded to before, this abstraction layer we're going to have is called a container. So we have, certain services, and services depend on other services. What the container does, it actually encodes those relationships. So we have a way to define our dependencies to say that the database connection service depends on the logging service. And now, if we look for our beer, I think I changed the name of the service, beer data, or beer list service, right? I can define that the beer list service depends on the database connection service and the logging service. Database connection service depends on the logging service. Logging service is by itself. And so now I basically get what I was looking for. Don't have to put in DB connection service. Actually, this code is not telling you anything new here. So now, instead of you might use a class or an object for your service, but instead of instantiating that class or object, you instead now instantiate a container. So you have a container class. You create a container, and then you ask the container to give you your service with all the dependencies. And so it looks like this. Define the container, give me the service that I asked for, and give me another service, and give me the beer list. So it's a pretty simple trade-off, and don't have to know the details. So we've successfully hid the implementation. So going a little bit more detail, Is anybody still awake? What I really ended up with, instead of a single member to import the service, you typically have multiple members. So when you have a container and you ask for a service, I get a logging service. I don't actually get the logging handle that I wanted to use. So I need to have I need to define the log service and a convenience method to just give me the logging handle that I want for Perl, so that I can log my messages. The log service by itself is not very useful. So now I could be back in a situation where I have to, well, I need a log service, I have to define all this stuff. But now I'm back to using a role. Now I can use a role to give me the methods that that service uses or requires into my calling class. So now, instead of defining every member produced by the logging service, I can include it via a role. And now my code looks like this, where I have with the logging service role, with the beer data role. And now I'm really getting there. I'm really getting to what I want the code to look like. And for me, coming with a little bit of a C background, it's really like importing header files and using a library. And I wish I could have a different extension for roles than for other Perl modules and classes. I don't know. That's not possible, is it? I looked into it a little bit. Can you have an alternate extension for Perl modules? Huh. What? Don't want to do it? Yeah. Yeah, it's not going to happen either. I'm lazy. I want an easy life, not a hard life. And sure, your container, if you need to pass arguments to define your service correctly, you don't pass arguments to the service directly. You pass those arguments to the container. So if I want only dark beers for my beer data service, then I can pass it this beer filter to say I only want dark beers. So you see how the service is resolved. Because the container already has the data, it knows that beer data uses the beer filter. There's some details I'm not showing here, but so I'm trying to create some simple services and put it on putting it on GitHub and perhaps get something for CPAN. Let me skip that for a second. I do want to say that what do you get with breadboard? One thing you do get with breadboard is awesome stack traces. This is, yeah, I think I truncated this one. No, I didn't. That's the full stack trace. So, yeah, you can, it's doing something. It's definitely doing something. So a tip, like, well, pretty much any probably long stack trace from any language, well, you want to look at the beginning and the end of the stack trace. So problems you have with breadboard are, well, you try to use a service that's not in that container. Yeah, it tells me the service is undef, but you kind of gotta figure it out yourself. So things to make services. What do you want? What kind of services should you use? So in this environment, you know, I'm looking at a lot of high-level operations. No, I'm not doing any high-frequency trading with Perl. Unfortunately, if you expected that. People do write trading systems in Perl, but you just are never going to get the performance that you need compared to C++ and low-level performance optimization that you can do with Linux and C++. Excuse me. So we talked about this. We have a log service, beat it to death by now, database connection. But I actually use a database execution service that gives me common operations for the database. You know, exec SQL, exec returning a scalar, things like that. SSH execution service with things like file transfer. You know, as I showed before, servers, remote Linux processes, start-stop is up functionality, groups of servers. So I manage like 70 Linux servers, and they're in different parts of the world, and I may want to do one thing with one set of servers and something else with another set. So breadboard really helped me scale up my application functionality. So I was using this kind of naive, using a moose roll to include the code that I needed for my service, and it was starting to get really difficult when I had about 90 classes. Now I've got about 160 in my environment, and it's very tight. I have no bloat. I'm very, very streamlined and highly reuse oriented. But it really helped, and have a more simple code base to work with. And I do find some challenges with breadboard around containers. So what services do I put in which containers? If I have to pass arguments in the container, and I have two different services in it, I might have to instantiate the same container twice using different inputs. So here's what I'm talking about here. Let's do this. I could have just minimized that last time, right? So in this code here, the way I have things organized for managing services is you have your actual service code. So you can look at the logger. Yeah, so there's a lot of nice stuff that you want to hide there. And then we have a role so that whoever is using the service can, this is what the calling class will use to use the service. And then here I have my actual logging handle called log. And then we have a simple container. So here's the breadboard container. Use Moose. It's part of Moose breadboard. I found the best method is to extend the breadboard container class, and you have methods for things that may be input. So here I have a little more sophisticated example where the configuration of the log actually is a dependency of the logging service. So you need to pass in configuration information. Where does your log go? Am I doing info? Am I doing debug level? That type of thing. And let's see what we got here. So when I'm actually calling it, here I'm actually creating a container for this test object, so it's portable. I go and resolve the service. I think we've pretty much seen it before, and I'm able to use the logger, and it's nice and easy. Let me see here. Is this it? Just a little more of a survey. So when I talked with JT about this, it was supposed to be a survey for beginners of modules and not any cool, sexy, high-frequency trading stuff. Performance tuning. So a survey is just another way to say rambling, I think. Yeah, so we've got Moose. Love it. Datetime, just went to Dave Ralski's talk here. That's an awesome, very useful Perl module. Breadboard, log for Perl, XML Twig. Anybody use that? I love it. XML Twig fans? No? Come on. All right, cool. NetFrame layer, do a lot of low-level networking. And if you notice, I can't actually say anything specific about what I really do for a job. And then I make use of Fork. Fork is awesome. 70 servers. I'm not going to do it one by one. I guarantee you that. There's no way I have the patience for that. And there's a lot of Perl modules around Fork, but I ended up writing my own. How are we doing on time here? 5 minutes? I'll get to that a little bit, but here's where I need help from the audience. So SSH is a big pain in the neck. Either I'm missing something really fundamental about working with it. I have to really, I think, just knuckle down and start resolving these problems at a low level. So yeah, I had net SSH too. Everybody says, oh, use net open SSH. It's much more better supported. Yeah, it's great. I just got a different set of problems. So I had to go through the whole process of debugging and do workarounds. Yeah?
MST just talked about using object remote in his previous talk. And that addresses a lot of the...
Using what? Can you speak up?
What's that?
Object remote.
Matt Trout was using object remote in his last talk. And this addresses a lot of the issues that you're talking about here.
Mm-hmm. I looked at things like any event, but this is like blocking I/O and okay, object remote. I'll take a look at it. Yeah, so then it's not all SSH's fault. It's not all the Perl modules' fault. See, I'm still thinking about beer. TTY subsystem. Who here really understands the TTY subsystem? Anybody?
No one understands the TTY.
Right. Difficult to debug. And you know what? Just use backticks if it doesn't work. That's how I get around some of my problems. I just go to the call it.
From MST's talk, minus capital S on SSH will bypass the TTY subsystem and use standard in, standard error.
A dash S passed where? Capital S.
To SSH.
SSH.
When you have a chance, go listen to the recording of his talk.
Yes.
It was in the previous time session.
Great.
No, I use that SFTP and I thought it just transfer huge files. The buffer was too small. Increase I just found it too slow. So I wrote modules around command line SFTP. We get our clients that install our SSH keys so we don't have the interactive password.
Right.
It works really well.
Net open SSH has a sister model, net SFTP4, net 4 and SFTP.
Right. That's on here. Sorry, what?
I run single system image clustering.
Yeah, can we do this with UDP patches?
All right. Another technology that is, I think, unique in the trading environment is multicast. Does anybody use multicast here? You do. What type of and what type of way do you use multicast generally?
Communicate between a collection of cooperating processes.
Yep, that's exactly what I was getting at here for my last point here. I think it's a great way to signal. I'm not actually using it right now, but I do have some plans coming down the pipe where, yeah, I might do the same thing. But multicast is anybody? Well, let me explain what multicast is. So, right, you have a single source, and that person, that source sends out a message, usually UDP, and it goes to a router. There are clients. A client will join a multicast group. So it will register with the router. It'll say, "Hey, I want the multicast from this multicast group." So the router then sends it only to those people who have signed up to that multicast group, and unlike a broadcast where it automatically goes to everyone. So it's it's a solid part of the networking. There's a reserved range of IPs just for multicast. All the routers know how to do it. It's used in the trading industry famously for broadcasting prices. So if you have 20 traders all with their own PC and they want real-time prices, they have trading clients that subscribe to certain multicast groups. So yeah, it's a good way to do application level signaling. You don't have to worry about managing a lot of sockets. No.
But it doesn't matter if it's a second layer, it's out of date.
Right. So for things like prices, yeah, you miss one packet, it's not going to change too much because there's a lot of data coming down. So you have to evaluate whether it's the right thing for you. But one thing, if you ever mention multicast, there's one thing you should never do. So we have a multicast sender code from this great I/O socket multicast, and you see how simple the code is. But this line here, there's a TTL, time to live. So that's like how many router bounces can the message go before it dies. Never set TTL equal to 1 because it will because it will cause many routers to go to 100% CPU and shut down the network. So okay, that's a little. Be careful there. All right, maybe I don't know. Maybe that's too big of a risk. But in these kind of aggressive environments like these trading firms, they'll just say, "Well, never set it to 1." Here we have the other half, a multicast receiver, and very very simple. I think I copied these out of the module, but hopefully it's self-explanatory. Yeah, so I have a module. I think I've never put anything on CPAN. It's gonna happen though pretty soon. I've been a very good consumer of Perl and love it, and I've submitted bug reports. So baby steps, but yeah, I have a fork module I'm excited about. So I don't know, you can follow me on GitHub, and we'll see if I ever put it up there. I'm determined to do so. Yeah, so yeah, here's some of my info. Stay in touch. I'm on the Windy City and Chicago PM mailing lists. Any questions?
Regarding your logging of everything, I see that you're using log for the whole. Are you logging to a central file, or have you set up a centralized logging infrastructure?
I log to a central file on a management server that basically does all the SSH operations on the other machines, and then everything is logged into a single file. The Mojo product I use goes one better. So I usually go to both standard out, and to a file. So I use this Mojo product. It runs a Perl script, captures the standard output, and logs that onto a Tomcat server. So and formats it in an HTML. So that's something I really like. So I have a job that's scheduled. It fires. Mojo tells me if it's successful or not. I can just click very quickly. It pulls up on the web. So that's how I use it. Anything else? Thank you all for coming.
Says the reason you probably got him as the first result on the GIS is because you followed him on the G+, and so you got a customized search result back.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.